few years back, a boy named Minato Naramiya discovered his passion for Kyudo while watching a tournament with his mother. He was enchanted by the sound of the bowstring called Tsurune, which made him eager to join the Kyudo club at Kirasaki Private Middle School. Now, as he gets ready to start high school at Kazemai, Minato decides to go for a morning run on a scenic mountain path. While he is at a park, he stops to wash his face, and suddenly, a big dog named Kuma jumps on him. Minato recognizes Kuma as the pet of the Takeya family and expects to see Mr. Takeya, who usually walks him. To his surprise, it's actually his best friend, Seiya Takeya. Seiya quickly reminds Minato to dry his face, concerned that he might catch a cold. When Minato asks if Seiya will also be going to Kazemai, Seiya seems surprised that Minato already knew this information. As they walk home together, Seiya feels really happy that they will be attending the same school again. During the entrance ceremony, Seiya delivers a speech as the first-year representative. Afterward, different clubs gather to recruit new members. A tough-looking boy scares off a soccer club recruiter until another boy tells him to back off. Meanwhile, Minato and Seiya step outside, where a tall boy suddenly wraps his arms around them. At first, Minato thinks it is another recruiter, but Seiya realizes it is Ryohei Yamanouchi, their childhood friend who had moved away during elementary school. Now much taller, Ryohei is excited to reunite with them. Soon, Tomio Morioka, Ryohei's homeroom teacher, approaches them. Known as Tommy-sensei, he asks for their help with something but does not explain. Curious, they follow him to the Kyudo dojo, which makes Minato uneasy. Tomio tells them that Kazemai has a Kyudo dojo, but the club has been inactive. The principal wants it to be revived. Ryohei is thrilled and shares that he practiced Kyudo in middle school, wanting to continue. He also mentions that Minato and Seiya were part of their middle school team. However, Minato refuses to join, explaining that he has too many responsibilities at home after his mother's passing. Ryohei, unaware of this, apologizes, but Minato reassures him. Tomio asks Seiya and Ryohei to join, and they agree. Before leaving, Tomio tells Minato he is welcome anytime. Later, Seiya asks Minato if he is truly giving up Kyudo, and Minato insists he has quit. After school, Minato buys groceries and rides his bike home. At home, he bows at his mother's shrine before heading to his room. His father texts him, saying he will be home late and does not need dinner. Lying on his bed, Minato hears students talking about the clubs they joined. In his bag, he finds a small pouch with a dragonfly design, which brings back memories. The next day, their homeroom teacher reminds students to submit their club forms. Seiya fills out his for the Kyudo club while Minato stares out the window. After class, a girl from the Kyudo club talks to Seiya and Minato quietly leaves. At the back gate, Ryohei catches up to him, begging him to attend the Kyudo briefing. Minato refuses, but Ryohei keeps insisting, saying he is nervous about the weird girls in the club. He even calls Minato his hero, embarrassing him. Ryohei admits that watching Minato in middle school inspired him to take up Kyudo. He offers to help Minato with chores if he agrees to attend. Eventually, Minato gives in but insists he will only watch. At the Kyudo dojo, Seiya and some experienced members prepare for the briefing. Tomio mentions that 2 skilled archers will be joining. Seiya is eager to rebuild the club. Soon, many beginners arrive. A charming boy named Nano greets his fans, while his serious cousin, Kaido, scolds him for being loud in the dojo. Though they tease each other, Kaido is dedicated to Kyudo. These 2 are the experienced members Tomio mentioned. Tomio introduces the female members, Rika, Noa, and Yuuna. Seiya also introduces himself. Then, Ryohei enters, dragging Minato along. As Tomio starts the briefing, he emphasizes the discipline required in Kyudo, and introduces the 3 main tools, the bow, the arrow, and the glove. To demonstrate, he asks Minato to shoot. Minato hesitates, saying he is not a club member, but the students clap, pressuring him. Kaido hands him an arrow and checks his draw weight despite Minato's protests. He challenges Minato's pride as an archer, making him uncomfortable. Reluctantly, Minato takes out his own glove from the dragonfly pouch. As Minato prepares to shoot, Tomio explains the technique. Minato tells himself that this time will be different. However, when he releases the arrow, he misses. Tomio encourages him to try again, but Minato starts trembling as he recalls his past failures in middle school. He misses once more and becomes frustrated. Kaido scolds him, saying he should take Kyudo seriously. Minato, overwhelmed, declares that he is no longer an archer and walks away. Seiya quietly observes that Minato is suffering from headache. As Minato rides his bike, he recalls how people sympathized with him when his struggles with headache began. He remembers breaking down after a middle school competition while Seiya tried to comfort him. Lost in thought, he rides until it gets dark, stopping near a forest road. Suddenly, he hears the sound of a Tsurune coming from the woods. Intrigued, he follows the noise and discovers a hidden Kyudo dojo called Yata no Mori. There, he sees a young man practicing Kyudo with incredible skill. The target is already filled with arrows. Minato watches in awe. Just then, a white owl calls out, startling him, and he stumbles. The archer notices him and calls the owl named Fu to his arm. One night, a mysterious man talks to his owl about an unexpected visitor. The visitor, Minato, tries to leave but stumbles and injures his right hand. The man notices and invites him inside the Kyudojo to treat his wound. While cleaning and wrapping it, he shares his unique practice method. He doesn't count the number of successful shots, only the total arrows he shoots. Every day, he fires 100 arrows until he reaches 10,000. He offers Minato a chance to shoot, but the memory of his previous failure overwhelms Minato, and he quickly leaves. The next day at school, Minato keeps thinking about the man. Seiya notices the bandage on Minato's hand and asks about it, but Minato avoids answering. Later, Ryohei comes to practice Kyudo with him but finds that Minato has already left. Minato returns to Yata Shrine and finds the man, Masaki, repairing his bow. Masaki playfully asks Minato to find a box of glove powder with a funny bikini design. Minato hesitates but eventually hands it over. Masaki's owl lands on Minato's shoulder, surprising him. As Masaki shoots an arrow, Minato watches feeling fascinated. At the Kyudo Club, Tomio teaches the new members about bows and shares some traditional Kyudo wisdom. Kaido, impatient with the slow pace, complains, but Nanao reminds him that everyone starts as a beginner. The girls are surprised that they are allowed to handle bows so soon, but Tomio believes learning by doing is best. Afterward, Tomio asks the experienced members if they want to join the upcoming prefectural tournament. Since they don't have enough people for a full team, he suggests they compete individually. The girls agree, but Seiya insists the boys should enter as a team, assuming Minato will join. Kaido disagrees, saying Minato won't return, and gets upset when Seiya claims Minato is a better archer than he is. Tomio tells them to think carefully before deciding. After practice, Ryohei and Seiya wait for the bus. Ryohei wonders how they can convince Minato to join. He asks Seiya about Heike, but Seiya only knows that Minato struggles with it. Ryohei points out that Seiya wants to shoot with Minato, which is why he insists on a team competition. Seiya doesn't deny it but says that's not his only reason. He wants to make up for something. Later at the Kyudojo, Minato remembers a competition from 10 months ago. He and Seiya had reached the finals at Kirasaki, where Minato was expected to rival Shu Fujiwara. Before the last round, Shu mentioned that their instructor, Seonji-sensei, was watching. Feeling confident, Minato took his shot but released the arrow too early, missing the target. Shocked, both he and Seiya watched as Shu hit his mark. Minato's nervousness worsened, and he kept missing, causing their team to lose. Back in the present, a man offers Minato an oyaki while writing in a notebook. Minato asks what he will do after shooting 10,000 arrows. To Minato's surprise, the man says he will quit Kyudo. He then asks Minato about his own future. Minato admits his struggle with Heike and how he can no longer hear the perfect sound of a shot, called Tsurune. The man understands and shares that he experienced Heike in high school. Though he still hit targets, his form was wrong. He tried different methods to fix it but never fully recovered. He tells Minato that Kyudo should be about teamwork and that sometimes, he feels invisible in the world. That night, Minato returns home late. Seiya sees a feather on his jacket and suggests they enter the prefectural tournament together. Minato refuses, saying he isn't good enough and doesn't see them as a team. When Seiya insists they are a team, Minato snaps, asking why Seiya never spoke up in middle school. Seiya, frustrated, challenges Minato to admit that he was the reason their team lost in the finals. He warns Minato that if he pushes him further, he might make him cry. Alone in his room, Minato tries to hold back tears and yells into his pillow. While doing so, the box of glove powder falls from his pocket, reminding him of Masaki. He decides to return it the next day. That evening, his father comes home, and Minato prepares dinner. As they eat, his father praises his cooking, saying it tastes like his mother's. They talk about school and Kyudo, and his father expresses sadness that Minato's mother never got to see him continue his practice. The next day, Minato visits the Kyudojo to return the glove powder box. To his surprise, the place is crowded with people practicing. A woman informs him that Takagawa-san passed away a year ago, leaving Minato confused. On Sunday, Minato and his father visit their family grave. Minato remembers his mother's words about Tsurune and her promise to support him. As they pray, his father encourages him to live a life without regrets. That night, Minato goes back to the Kyudojo to return the box. Masaki tells him to keep it. As Masaki prepares to shoot his 10,000th arrow, Minato suddenly pleads with him not to disappear, saying he wants to watch him shoot more. Masaki laughs, realizing that Minato thought he was a ghost. The woman had mistaken him for someone else. Masaki then asks Minato to take the final shot for him. Though uncertain, Minato agrees. He misses the target, but the experience brings him happiness. He tells Masaki that he knows he won't give up on Kyudo, and that he won't give up either. The next day, Minato decides to join the Kyudo club even though he hasn't overcome his headache. The club members welcome him warmly, except for Kaido, who doesn't acknowledge Minato because he thinks Minato isn't skilled enough. After school, Ryohei rushes to Minato and Seiya's classes to walk with them to practice, which annoys Minato. In the changing room, Ryohei apologizes for making Minato uncomfortable, but Minato admits he expected some hostility. Seiya helps Ryohei put on his hakama for the first time, reassuring him. In the Kyudojo, Minato helps set up the target since Nanao is late. When Nanao arrives, he thanks Minato and greets him with merha, explaining that it comes from the Turkish word merhaba. Yuuna tells him not to encourage Nanao's antics. The conversation shifts to why many beginners quit the club. Some blame Nanao's fans, while others felt intimidated by Kaido or found the training too slow. Now, with Minato's arrival, the club has 8 members. Rika defends Nanao and Kaido, saying those students would have quit anyway. Nanao is happy they now have enough members for a group tournament, but Kaido refuses to team up with Minato, calling him indecisive. Minato remains calm. As the boys argue, Tomio watches without interfering, believing they need to sort things out themselves. He doesn't know why Minato changed his mind about Kyudo but trusts his determination. After practice, Minato leaves early to buy groceries. At the bus stop, Ryohei asks Seiya how to help Minato with headache, but Seiya hesitates. He admits he didn't understand headache back in middle school, and assumed Minato would recover quickly. Seiya now wants to support Minato quietly rather than pushing him. Meanwhile, he wonders what caused Minato's sudden change of heart. Determined to help, Ryohei goes to the library to research headache. Finding no clear answers, he meets a Kyudo veteran who directs him to an archery shop. At Nakazaki Archery Supplies, the shop owner gives Ryohei a photocopied diary of someone who struggled with headache, in exchange for Ryohei's promise to buy all his gear from the shop. Excited, Ryohei agrees. At home, he reads the diary and feels hopeful that Minato can overcome headache too. The next morning, Ryohei visits Minato's house but learns from Minato's father that he left early. Minato arrives at the Kyudojo to clean and practice alone. He reads a diary Masaki gave him about overcoming headache. Masaki had told him they would meet again if he kept practicing Kyudo. Ryohei secretly watches Minato using a training method from the diary and admires his dedication. On the train, Kaido asks Nanao if he was really the reason so many club members quit. Nanao realizes Kaido worries about it but also knows Kaido dislikes people who don't take Kyudo seriously, like Minato in his eyes. Nanao challenges Kaido, asking why he won't acknowledge Minato's efforts. Kaido stubbornly refuses. Nanao then questions why Kaido didn't join a strong Kyudo school. Kaido admits he wants to be part of an underdog team that defeats the best school. Nanao suspects Kaido secretly wants to compete in the tournament but denies it when asked. At practice, Minato asks Seiya to help him time his full draw. Kaido, distracted by their training, misses his own shot and gets frustrated. Nanao notices Ryohei looking troubled and talks to him. Ryohei admits he feels guilty for dragging Minato into the club, as he always saw him as a hero. He enjoys the club but hates the tension between Minato and Kaido. Nanao reassures him that a little annoyance can be good between friends and decides to help. Seiya watches them and realizes they're planning something. The next morning, Ryohei and Nanao plan to have Kaido see Minato practicing early, hoping it will make him respect Minato's dedication. However, when they arrive at school, they find Seiya already there, investigating who has been cleaning the Kyudojo early. The girls also show up, curious about the same thing. Kaido arrives too. They all overhear Seiya confronting Minato in the dojo. Seiya asks why he returned to Kyudo. Minato explains that when he got headache, the perfect shot sound he loved became a curse, making him want to quit. But hearing an even more beautiful Tsurune made him realize he loved Kyudo too much to give up. Seiya comments that if Minato had said this to Kaido earlier, they wouldn't be fighting. He then welcomes Minato back. Hearing this, Kaido silently leaves. Ryohei and Nanao chase after him, but Kaido dismisses their plan. Ryohei insists that Minato will overcome Hayek one day. Respecting Ryohei's belief, Kaido acknowledges Minato for now. Later, Kaido warns Minato that if he ever does Kyudo half-heartedly, he'll be kicked out. Minato promises he never will. Tomio tells Seiya he didn't expect him to interfere. Seiya replies that he couldn't stop himself. They both agree it's a good first step. Ryohei is thrilled they can now enter the group tournament. Kaido tells him that Kirasaki is the strongest team, making Ryohei eager to beat them. However, Seiya and Minato exchange nervous looks, knowing how strong Kirasaki really is. Later, Ryohei returns the diary to Nagasaki Archery Supplies. He thanks the man who helped him, who then notices Ryohei's Kazemai uniform. The man reveals he is a member of Kirasaki's Kudo club. Later, he informs his teammates about Kazemai's new team, but they aren't worried. They believe they will win easily, especially since they have Shu Fujiwara. Back at Kazemai, Tomio announces the club will enter the prefectural tournament. He also reveals they will get a new coach, as his back problems prevent him from shooting. To Minato and Kaido's shock, their new coach is Masaki. Even more surprising, both Minato and Kaido already know him. Masaki becomes the new coach of the Kudo club, surprising the members. Tomio explains that they are old friends and that Masaki has 15 years of experience. Minato notices that Masaki has cut his hair, and Masaki says it was getting in the way. Kaido is shocked because Masaki had previously said he would take a break from Kudo. Minato, however, is happy. Masaki recognizes Nanao, who says he heard about him from Kaido. Seiya and Ryohei introduce themselves before Masaki starts practice. Tomio leaves for a meeting, putting Masaki in charge. Masaki watches Minato hesitate before shooting, but Minato denies it. When Minato misses, Masaki still praises his effort. Kaido becomes annoyed by their bond, and Seiya points out that Kaido also knows Masaki well. Kaido is frustrated that Minato never told him about Masaki, while Seiya wonders why Masaki never mentioned Minato. Kaido complains about Minato not being his bestie, and Seiya teases him for using that word. The next day, Kaido scolds Ryohei and Minato for setting up targets incorrectly. The girls and Nanao tease him for being too strict. When Masaki and Tomio arrive, Tomio reminds Kaido that Kudo is about teamwork, which confuses him, as he always saw it as an individual sport. Masaki tells him to remember the lesson. That evening, Kaido and Nanao hang out in Kaido's room. Nanao suspects that teamwork is important because of the upcoming group tournament. As Kaido bandages Nanao's injured arm, he insists that skill matters more than making others feel good. Nanao accuses him of being jealous of Masaki's attention to others, but Kaido denies it and claims he dislikes Minato because he is clueless. Meanwhile, Minato prepares dinner for himself and his father. His father notices he seems happy. The doorbell rings, revealing Seiya and Kuma. Seiya seems surprised to see Minato's father home early. When Minato asks why they came, Seiya makes up an excuse about homework and then leaves, frustrated that his plan failed. At practice, Ryohei struggles to string his bow. Kaido steps in to help but accidentally causes Ryohei to hit Minato's forehead. Seiya scolds both of them, but Minato tries to calm things down. Kaido snaps at him to stop acting nice. Masaki arrives and announces a mock tournament. Kaido objects, saying it's too soon. Noah points out that there are only 3 girls, but Masaki reveals he and an Oni archer will join. The Oni archer turns out to be Tomio, surprising everyone. Masaki explains that Tomio rarely shoots due to back problems. Kaido immediately agrees to join upon hearing Masaki will participate, but is disappointed to learn they will compete against each other. The teams decide their shooting order. Masaki adds a rule: the losing team must serve the winners. Kaido and Seiya argue about shooting last, but time runs out and the tournament begins. The boys' team shoots first, followed by the girls' mixed team. When it's Tomio's turn, the boys expect him to miss because of his shaky hands, but he surprises them by hitting the center. Masaki's flawless shot impresses everyone. The girls' team wins, making the boys their servants. As punishment, the boys wear servant t-shirts and pull weeds at the range. Nanao and Ryohei tease Kaido, who blames Minato for their loss. As Kaido and Seiya argue again, Ryohei asks them to get along. After finishing, Kaido demands a rematch but is told that Tomio's back pain prevents him from shooting again. Seiya asks how long they must serve, and Masaki jokingly says forever before revealing it's only for today, and a 3-day weekend training camp. Kaido is excited, while Nanao initially refuses, saying he has a date. However, he later decides to go. Rika also wants to join but needs parental permission. Masaki reminds the boys to bring their servant shirts. Later, Kaido feeds his cat, Lucy, and gets a message from Masaki asking him to arrive an hour early at camp for a favor. Kaido happily agrees. On the first morning of training camp, Kaido arrives early and sees a man taking photos at a shrine. Inside, Masaki helps Minato wear his late grandfather's kimono for a ceremonial shooting. Minato asks why Masaki initially told him to quit Kyudo instead of joining the club. But before Masaki can answer, Kaido rushes in, dragging the photographer. Masaki clarifies that the man is his older brother, Ren. The rest of the club gathers at the Kyudojo, waiting for the ceremony. Nanao and Noah whisper that Masaki and Ren don't look alike. Soon, Masaki, Kaido, and Minato appear, and Tomio announces the start of the Yawatashi and training camp. Kaido stays with Masaki, while Minato moves to the Azuchi. As the ceremony begins, Minato reflects on the Yawatashi as a prayer for archers' safety. He believes that if a god of archery exists, he must be watching Masaki and hopes that one day that god will smile at him too. On the second day of training camp, Masaki wakes the boys up early. As they sit up, Ren takes pictures of them while they're still half asleep. Then, Masaki tells everyone that they have only 15 minutes to get ready. After that, they have to assemble in the main hall. Meanwhile, Seiya also wakes up, still half asleep, and his clumsy movements scare everyone for a second. Once they gather at the hall, Masaki checks their attendance and gives them chores like polishing the floors and organizing plaques. Kaido complains, saying those are usually his jobs, but no one listens. After breakfast, the boys head to the Kyudojo. However, instead of practicing, Masaki tells them to pull weeds from the Emichi. At this, Kaido gets frustrated and tells Masaki to knock it off. The others are also upset because they want to practice for the tournament instead of doing chores. Nanao speaks up and tells Masaki that this is not a Kyudo training camp at all. The boys beg Masaki to let them practice Kyudo. Finally, he agrees, but only to let them fix the target bank, set up targets, and put up new target sheets. When Kaido speaks up again, Masaki tells him that he can start by making the paste in the kitchen. Just then, Seiya speaks up and says what everyone's thinking, that they want Masaki to teach them how to shoot. In response, Masaki tells them that he wants them to shoot, but he reminds them that a match is a match. After a moment of thinking, Masaki finally says that they can practice shooting if they finish their chores first. Although the boys aren't happy, they agree to do the work. Later, the boys start stirring up the dirt to prepare the area. As they work, Ryohei tells Kaido to slow down, saying he's going too fast. However, Kaido argues that they need to soften the dirt if they want to set up the targets properly. Then, Ryohei turns to Seiya and asks what he's doing. Seiya replies that if the angle isn't just right, it annoys him. A little while later, Masaki announces that the master team is waiting. Once the boys finish their work, they'll need to record the result of the baddies and retrieve their arrows. Even though the boys aren't happy about this, they still agree. Then, Masaki tells Ren to take the pictures properly. One of the girls complains that it is unfair to practice without the boys. However, Masaki tells her that the boys will learn by watching. Then, Seiya asks Masaki if they can practice if there's any time left over. Instead of answering, Masaki ignores his question and tells them to buy ingredients for dinner. Later, the boys walk toward the supermarket. Along the way, Nanao suggests that they split up to save time. Kaido agrees, saying that they need to be quick so Masaki can teach them. Without wasting any more time, the group quickly heads to the Walmart. Once they arrive, Kaido gets mad and tells everyone to grab the groceries in 20 minutes and meet back at the spot. In the meat section, Minato notices a sign that says there's 20% off on meat. Curious, he turns to Nanao and asks if Kaido hates him. Nanao thinks for a moment and then says that Kaido doesn't really hate anyone, but he might start acting nicer around Minato later. He then adds that Kaido once went out of his way to buy a special hat for Minato. After some time, the boys meet back at the spot. Soon, they start arguing about their favorite kinds of meat. Some of them like beef, and the debate gets pretty heated. Later, they decide to take a group selfie with a nearby statue. But just as they snap the photo, a strong gust of wind suddenly blows Nanao's special hat away. When they return, Masaki notices they're soaking wet and asks if they fell in the river. In response, Nanao explains that his hat flew off because of the wind, and Minato went after it to retrieve it. Hearing this, Masaki sighs and says that the masters get to bathe first, but this time, the boys should go ahead and clean up. In the bathroom, Kaido turns to Minato and asks why he went after the hat. Minato then explains that Nanao told him the hat was a special gift from Kaido, so he felt like he had to get it back. As the other boys join them in the bath, Nanao asks Seiya why he decided to come to Kazemai. Seiya replies that he came because of Minato, which shocks everyone, especially Minato, who had no idea. Meanwhile, Masaki overhears the boys' conversation in the bath and announces that their time is up. Later, the group gathers to cook barbecue together. This time, Nanao takes the lead in serving the masters, preparing a special mushroom and cheese barbecue. Then, Shurajiku asks Nanao if he can make her an iced latte. The others tease her, saying she is way too into this. Then, Nanao turns to Minato and asks what he is making. Minato smiles and says, chocolate bananas. Meanwhile, Ren snaps a few pictures of the boys and shows them to Masaki, who chuckles at the sight. As Minato glances at the wet clothes, he looks at Masaki and asks why did he choose to be their coach, to which he replies that it was because of Tomio-sensei. The next day at the Kyudojo, Masaki tells the boys that he accepts their duties and gives them permission to practice Kyudo. Soon after, Tomio-sensei also returns, saying that he came to give them firing orders. Then, Tomio assigns everyone to Yonteki and Achai. Masaki likes how he made Minato Achai and Kaido Yonteki. Afterward, the boys begin practicing their positions, focusing on their form. Later, Morioka-sensei gives them their uniforms. Excitement fills the air as they put them on. Finally, Ren takes one last picture of the group. The next day, Tomio announces that midterms will start next week. Nana waves goodbye to the Hottas and walks with Ryohei. Everyone in the archery club arrives early to practice since they won't be able to do club activities during midterms. Masaki teaches Ryohei how to hold the bow, but he still misses the shot. Meanwhile, Masaki turns to Kaido and asks about the question he had asked earlier. He warns that if Kaido doesn't ask now, he will have to wait a week. Kaido says he wants his bow to turn. Masaki appreciates his question, telling him if it's not happening then he is lacking something. As Kaido prepares to shoot, Masaki explains the technique step by step. Kaido focuses and releases the arrow, but he still misses the target. Masaki picks up a bow and releases a perfect shot. The arrow hits the center, surprising everyone. The boys get frustrated over the break, which makes Masaki laugh. Afterward, they start cleaning the dojo, and as they work, Minato turns to Masaki and asks if he has to return the kimono. Masaki says his grandfather's teachings made him an archer. After cleaning, the boys are still sad about the upcoming exams. Nanao says that Masaki is different from Tomio-sensei. However, Seiya disagrees, saying that Masaki's statements are correct. Nanao says if Masaki's master was the one who said that, then maybe he's even better than him. Minato says it's his grandfather. Later, as Masaki begins to close the dojo, Tomio-sensei approaches him and asks about his feelings for the upcoming weekend. Meanwhile, at another Kyudo club, twin brothers take their shots but end up hitting each other's targets. Matamura calls them out, warning them that they shouldn't joke around with their aim. However, as he watches them closely, he realizes that their form is completely different from what Kirasaki shooters usually use. Beside them, Shu stands with his bow, and since his first year of middle school, he has delivered beautiful shots. Watching him, Matamura is reminded of someone he once knew. Suddenly, Muto-sensei steps forward and announces that tryouts will be held on Saturday to determine who will participate in the tournament. Manji raises his hand and asks about the selection criteria. Muto-sensei explains that both men and women will take their 10 best shots, and those with the highest scores will qualify. Without a word, Shu draws his bow and completely cooks with it. The arrow flies straight to the center of the target, leaving everyone in shock. Meanwhile, Kaido practices his aim at his house when Nanao walks in and tells him that he is obsessed. On the other hand, Minato turns to Seiya and asks if he has anything he wants to talk about. Seiya brings up Shu and asks if Minato is ready to face him at the tournament. He points out that if Shu attends, they will definitely run into each other. However, Minato simply replies that Shu has probably forgotten about him by now. Outside Kyudo Hall, Mangi and Shinichi sit with Shu. They asked him about the guy who self-destructed at last year's tournament. Shu glances at them and asks if they are acting like this on purpose. In response, Mangi and Shinichi say that they simply like people who are good at what they do. Just then, Kabashima approaches Shu and tells Shu to miss targets intentionally. On the other hand, Masaki goes out to drink some beer with Tomio-sensei. As they sit together, Tomio-sensei takes a sip and expresses his appreciation for Masaki becoming the boys' coach. He then mentions that the second time he called Masaki, it was a nothing-to-lose call. Hearing this, Masaki says that his grandfather was a great archer, but as a teacher, he was strict. The next day, after clearing their final exam, the boys ran toward the Kyudo dojo, excited to train again. As soon as they arrive, Masaki informs them that they have received the programs for the tournament. They gather around to take a look. After scanning the list, Minato's eyes widened in surprise. He realizes that his name is at the very top of the list, and just a little further down, he spots Shu's name. Minato arrived at Kyokakudo Hall, running to the other side. As he looked around, he spotted a woman practicing archery. Beside her, Shu was sitting calmly. Noticing Minato, he looked up and asked, "Who are you?" At that moment, Minato suddenly woke up. It turned out it was just a dream. Meanwhile, Kaido and Nanao are on the train, heading toward the tournament venue. Nanao looks at Kaido and tells him to sit, but Kaido refuses as he wants to increase his aura points. At the same time, Minato is at home playing with his dog, enjoying a brief moment of relaxation. Meanwhile, Seiya and his mother are getting ready to travel together. As they make their way, she asks if they are participating in the individual matches today. Seiya shakes his head and explains that the bows they are carrying are for practice at school since it's the opening ceremony. On the other hand, Noah is at the temple, praying sincerely that everything goes well, and that Minato recovers quickly. Masaki and Tomio-sensei welcome the boys as they arrive at the hall. Tomio-sensei looks at them and instructs them to fire each shot carefully. Meanwhile, Masaki reminds them that today marks the first public match of the Keizumai High School Kyudo Club. Moreover, he explains that a tournament has a completely different atmosphere, so they should not get confused by their surroundings. Instead, he urges them to stay focused on themselves and their performance. Tomio-sensei and Masaki go ahead first to discuss something with the organizers. Meanwhile, inside the hall, the boys feel excited as they take in the crowd. Seeing so many pretty maidens around, they can't help but be bricked. Nana says that girls in Hakama look really nice, which makes Ryohei blush in embarrassment. Just then, Kaido suddenly notices Kirasaki approaching them. The Sugawara twins from Kirasaki High School leave the boys shaken, as they tell Nanao that their girls are not interested in them. However, the twins are soon caught off guard when they notice Seiya and Minato recognizing them as Shu's former teammates. Just as they start to laugh at them, Kaido calls them a son of cats, furious over why they are laughing at his friends. During the confrontation, Minato comes face to face with his former teammate, Shu. They first learned Kyudo together when they were younger. Then, he turns to Seiya, saying he hasn't changed at all, still acting like Minato's puppet. Seiya replies that he heard Shu recently landed a 20-shot kaichu. Shu doesn't respond to that. Instead, he looks back at Minato and asks if he is competing in the individual matches today. Shu can't wait to face off against Minato, which makes Kaido furious. Shu moves towards Minato and says that he always believed he would return to Kyudo. Seiya turns to Ryohei and asks if he really didn't know about the president. Ryohei quickly apologizes for leaking information to their rival group. Soon, the girls' individual competition begins. As the match progresses, a girl misses her shot, and the simp starts clapping. Minato quickly stops him, explaining that applause is only for kaichu. A few moments later, Rika successfully lands a kaichu. However, Noah struggles. She misses all of her targets because she is trying to compete while having a fever. Noticing her condition, Nanao quietly tells Kaido about Noah's health. Just then, the Sugawara twins appear once again, irritating Kaido with their comments. Before things escalate, Shu steps in and calmly tells them that it's not right to mock others. It's time for the boys' individual qualifier to begin. Kaido gets to his position and hits a kaichu. Ryuhei is surprised to see Kaido turn his bow. Meanwhile, Shu hits perfectly, and Minato, seeing Shu shoot for the first time in a long while, is stunned by how much better he has gotten. Meanwhile, Kaido misses his second shot, which makes Seiya realize that something is off. Kaido is forcing his bow to turn, but his focus is clearly on Shu instead of his own form. As the match continues, Kaido continues to shoot like a stormtrooper, causing concern among the team. Everyone watches anxiously, unsure of what's wrong. Shu wins the competition after a tie-breaking match between him and Hiroki. In the end, the only one from Keizumai going to the finals is Rika. Feeling uneasy, Nanao suddenly gets up and heads to the bathroom. At that moment, Minato comes to a realization. Shu is not the same as he once was. He recalls the same dream, where he tells Shu that he wants to bow. Shu tells him that the term is shoot. When Minato sees Shu walking outside, he runs to him. Minato spots Kaido angrily punching a tree, frustrated at his bad results. In the end, Matamura missed his fourth shot, and Shu won. After the competition, Masaki gathers everyone and informs them that Noah is feeling better. He made sure to send her home first. Meanwhile, Tomio-sensei takes a moment to appreciate everyone's effort and performance. Noticing the gloomy atmosphere, both he and Masaki encourage the team to smile, reminding them that there are still more matches ahead. However, Masaki turns to Kaido and scolds him for forcing his bow to turn. He firmly tells him that he needs to let go of this obsession if he wants to improve. At night, Kaido refuses to rest and continues practicing with determination. Meanwhile, Minato, deeply moved by Shu's incredible shooting and affected by what happened with Kaido, makes up his mind. He is determined to do his best in the group competition tomorrow. It is the second day of the tournament, and it is time for the group match. Tomio-sensei gathers the boys and reminds them not to get too worked up, encouraging them to stay calm and focused. However, Masaki seems to have bad news already. He informs the team that one of the schools has dropped out of the competition. As a result, Kazemai High will be firing at the second range. The boys are shocked when Masaki reveals that the team on the first range is Kirasaki. Hearing this, Kaido's eyes light up with excitement. This means he can finally face them head-on. Meanwhile, Minato is lost in thought, recalling his past. He remembers training alongside Shu for 3 months without even using an arrow. However, when Ryohei asks Seiya to help fix his bow, Seiya remains lost in his own thoughts. On the other hand, Kaido turns to Nanao and tells him to take things seriously today. He reminds him that this is their chance to get revenge on those who laughed at them. Suddenly, Minato stands up, looks at his teammates, and confidently tells him that he is ready to fight. Meanwhile, Ren approaches Seo and Hanazawa, telling them that he is here to support Kazemai. It is time for Group 3 for the tournament to enter the hall. Team Kazemai and Kirasaki stand in their position, looking at Shu while Ren wonders who he is. Seo tells him that he placed first yesterday. Kaido misses his shot again. Seeing this, Ren wonders if Kaido has gotten worse since the training camp. Meanwhile, Kirasaki's second and third archers blaze through their shots with impressive speed. Curious, Ren turns to Seo and asks if that is a common technique. Before Seo can respond, a random man sitting beside them speaks up, explaining that it is a legitimate strategy in archery. To their surprise, the man turns out to be someone who runs the place. He continues to explain that in high school Kyudo, if you want to win, you just have to hit the target, nothing else matters. Meanwhile, Minato takes his shot, but even though it is fast, he still misses. As the second round begins, an unexpected problem occurs. Ryohei's bowstring suddenly snaps. Despite the equipment failure, the judges still count it as a missed shot. After the match is over, Nakazaki approaches Ryohei and tells him that he sold that bowstring just yesterday. However, Ryohei shakes his head and explains that it was actually his old string. Nakazaki tells him to give him the string. He then examines the string carefully before looking back at Ryohei. He tells him to have more confidence in himself. At that moment, Masaki joins the conversation. Curious, Ren turns to Masaki and asks if he knows Nakazaki. However, Nakazaki, caught off guard, is shocked to hear that Masaki and Ren are brothers from another mother. Furthermore, Nakazaki tells Masaki that he ended up lending his panic notes to Ryohei. On the other hand, Nanao tries to reassure Kaido, telling him that it is okay to miss a shot. However, Kaido, frustrated and upset, snaps back. Angry over how much he takes archery seriously, he tells Nanao to get lost. Minato, who had been standing behind a tree watching them, steps forward and asks Nanao if he plans to go after Kaido. Nanao shakes his head, explaining that Kaido is just awkward around everyone. Minato tells Nanao that he looks at something beyond just the target, and that is what fuels his shots. Nanao replies that some people are born with real talent and put everything they have into archery, and he cannot beat people like that. Minato keeps thinking about why he shoots and what truly keeps him motivated. Just then, Seiya arrives and looks at Minato with concern. He tells him that he left him alone earlier and asks if he's alright. It's another round, and once again, Kaido misses a shot, followed by Ryohei. However, before taking his turn, Minato thinks about Kaido's feelings, trying to understand his frustration. With a deep breath, he focuses and releases his arrow. Minato's shot flies straight and true, landing perfectly at the center just like Shu's. Kaido gets ready to shoot again, determined to focus this time. He thinks about how he needs to stop acting like a poser and just trust himself. With a steady breath, he releases his arrow, and it hits the target. One by one, all the boys manage to hit their shots in this round. After the match, Ryohei rushes to the results board, scanning it anxiously. His eyes widened with excitement as he saw the results that Kazemai had passed. The boys stand in shock and amazement, barely believing their victory. Minato turns to Kaido and thanks him. He explains that yesterday, Kaido got mad on his behalf, and because of that, he could not focus properly. Kaido stands and tells everyone that next time they are going to win. Tomio-sensei congratulates the boys on passing, saying their shots in the second half are amazing. The team is still in shock, trying to process what just happened. Minato turns to Masaki with a curious look. He asks him about why he made him the Achai. But even as he questions it, he can't hide the small smile on his face. He is happy about it. Misaki just gives him a knowing smile in return. Outside, Shu and his teammates stand watching. Shu's eyes are locked on Minato. When Minato gets out, he finally speaks. Shu looks at Minato and says that he needs him, insisting that he has the potential to reach the same heights as him. Later, Shu sees Seiya hiding behind the tree. Seiya warns Shu not to rile Minato up and break his rhythm again. Shu then attacks Seiya, so he won't catch up with Minato as he reveals that he doesn't love archery. At the Kyudojo Hall, Kaido is being taught by Misaki on how to enhance his posture. Then, he advises Ryohei that his center seems off, telling him to improve it. Later, he mentions that Seiya is always stable but his speaking causes Seiya to miss. When Minato misses again, Misaki tells him to imagine looking down on others. Tomio-sensei arrives at the dojo, telling them that they are looking good. Then, Misaki tells Tomio-sensei that he is going to get busy with the boys. Tomio-sensei asks if the discussion is about the Amatsu festival. Misaki nods, explaining that the festival is a time to pray for their shrine. That afternoon, as the boys gather, Kaido announces that he needs to practice more. However, Nana steps in, reminding Kaido that he made mistakes earlier because he rushed his form in an attempt to win. His words linger in the air, making Kaido pause for a moment, reflecting on what went wrong. Then, Minato mentions that Kaido won't realize whether he truly knows or not. As the boys walk together, Seiya glances at Minato, as if he wants to say something but holds back. Meanwhile, Nana suggests that they should meet this Friday to discuss something important. However, he gets a bad as text to hang out, so he chose hoes over bros. They all like the idea of meeting up and then heading home. On the other hand, Shu speaks with his master, mentioning that Minato is doing well and might return to his old self. Then, he adds that they have a young man as their coach. The next day, the boys celebrate their victory with food. Kaido scolds Ryohei for stirring the food too much, as it ruins its taste. Minato asks Seiya if he mixed it properly, since he always complains about cabbage. Then, Hana shows some pictures, which were taken by Ren. Noa on the other hand feels down, saying she couldn't help getting sick. However, Kaido mentions that this time there will be stronger teams. Nana complains about how he cut his food, but Kaido felt that this could be related to archery. Minato then gives Seiya a bottle of spicy sauce, knowing how much he enjoys spicy food. No wonder he spends half his life in the toilet. Curiously, Noa asks if they all like spicy food. Minato replies that Seiya is the one who enjoys it the most. After having their silly conversations, the group goes to their homes. As Minato and Seiya walk together, Minato asks if Seiya had fun. However, Seiya responds that everyone seems to have different tastes. Reflecting on his middle school days, Minato explains that he used to believe both power and accuracy were equally important for a perfect shot. He then adds that, in the end, working together makes things easier, whereas doing it alone can be a struggle. Later that night, Seiya recalls Shu's words about chasing Minato. Spotting a chocolate wrapper, he suddenly remembers their first meeting, when he received the chocolate from him. Then, he receives a text from Minato, saying he will be late tomorrow. The next day, Seiya shares the story of Minato's accident, explaining how he regained consciousness after 10 days. Meanwhile, Minato goes for his usual checkup at the hospital. During practice, Seiya misses his shot as memories of Minato distract him. Noticing this, Kaido worries that Seiya might be experiencing target panic, but Nana reassures him that Seiya will improve once Minato returns. But Seiya the femboy misses once again. Misaki joins the others and asks about Minato's whereabouts. Others say that he will be late. Meanwhile, Minato's doctor mentions Seiya, explaining that he has lost much of his motivation since last winter. However, Minato responds that Seiya is working through it in his own way. Back at the Kyudojo, Tomio-sensei acknowledges the progress everyone has made since April but reminds them there is still more to improve. Misaki then asks Seiya if he wants to try Makiwara. Misaki helps Seiya adjust his left hand, noticing that he is forcing it too much. However, Seiya quickly asks if they are done, eager to return to the targets. Later, as rain begins to fall, he continues practicing. Stepping into his shooting position, Seiya finds his thoughts drifting to Minato again, almost as if he were an ex-wife. He recalls Minato excitedly telling him about firing a bow for the first time. When Seiya asks if he is going to tell her, Minato instead says he wants his own yugeki. Soon after, Minato leaves with his mother as the rain intensifies. Then, unexpectedly, he gets into an accident. Back at the Kyudojo, Seiya stands drenched as Kaido and the others ask if he plans to go alone. Seiya replies that he can't afford to drag them down in the tournament. Later, Misaki finds Seiya still in the dojo long after everyone else has left. He asks if Seiya loves Kyudo, admitting it's not his concern but noting that archers often lose their way. He then explains that this is how Minato rediscovered his love for archery. Seiya says he doesn't know if he loves archery but admits that he hates Masaki. Frustrated, Masaki watches as Seiya leaves. Meanwhile, Minato rushes toward the Kyudojo and asks Seiya if practice is over. However, Seiya doesn't respond and continues walking. The next day, Minato goes to Seiya's house to pick him up for school, but Seiya's mother informs him that Seiya is staying home because he's sick. At school, Minato struggles to focus, distracted by Seiya's absence. His teacher asks if he is enjoying Kazemai, but before he can respond, Kaido arrives and comments that Seiya hasn't seemed well lately. He adds that yesterday, Seiya was acting like an angry pissed baddie, snapping at Masaki. Minato, unaware of what happened, is caught off guard. Kaido then questions if they are really best friends. As he turns to leave, he warns Minato that if Seiya is off during the tournament, the whole team will be in trouble. Minato recalls when he apologized to Seiya for joining the practice himself. Minato tells Seiya that practicing together would have been fun, but Seiya simply responds that Kirasaki has a Kyudo club as well. Back in the Kyudo Hall, the clown gang continues to miss their shots. Meanwhile, Ryohei points out that Kaido's tip is dropping again, and both Minato and Nanao agree. Noah and the other baddies walk past, thinking about how well the group used to get along. Meanwhile, Masaki is lost in thought until Noah urges him to do something about the boys. Snapping out of it, Masaki asks them why they're fighting like stray dogs. He then decides to use his secret weapon. Curious, Seo asks what it is, and Masaki explains that the day before the festival, their shrine hands out talismans. The short baddie wonders what Masaki means by "you here." Masaki explains that it depends on the owner's mindset. Hearing this, Nano immediately tells Masaki that they are definitely going. Afterward, he asks Minato if Seiya will come as well. Later, Kaido tells the boys to meet up at the shrine the next day. Masaki tells Tomio-sensei that when he was a kid, adults seemed so put together, but now that he's older, he feels like he's constantly struggling. He adds that he never knew what level his grandfather was at, but he swore he would never act the same way. When asked if he loves Kyudo, Masaki realizes he has no clear answer, just like Seiya. Tomio-sensei then asks how Seiya responded to that question. Masaki replies that it felt like something was off. The next day, Minato visits Seiya's house again to check on him. Seiya simply responds that he will go if he feels like it. Meanwhile, Masaki quietly placed a chocolate inside the door handle before leaving. Minato meets up with the other boys and tells them that Seiya isn't feeling well. Nanao, as usual, makes a comparison that somehow relates to baddies again. Afterward, they arrive at the shrine and are shocked to find Masaki dressed in a Joker-like costume. At the same time, the Kirasaki group arrives and is equally stunned to see Masaki as a priest. Meanwhile, the twin brothers waste no time taunting the boys again. However, Matamura tells them to stay quiet, but the boys again start to make fun of them. They ask Kaido if some kind of talisman is really going to help them. Minato tells the group that if they don't hold their draw properly, they will lose track of their shots. Meanwhile, Nanao notices a Noriran fan from the Kirasaki group. The fan asks if he has heard of her, and soon, Nanao and the fan excitedly start talking about their beloved queen. Meanwhile, Shu and Minato quietly leave the area. As they walk, Shu asks if Seiya isn't coming. Shu tells Minato that he told Seiya that he was just practicing because of his obsession. As Minato goes to get a talisman, Shu tells him that he will understand soon. Meanwhile, despite being sick, Seiya struggles as his dog keeps pulling him forward. Feeling weak, he starts to faint. Seiya recalls when Minato was in hospital. Seiya told him that they were going to Kirasaki together to do archery. Seiya, who has not practiced archery in a while, decides to start again for Minato's sake and tells him to do the same. Back at the shrine, Kaido jokingly asks Nanao if he has gained any powers from the talisman. Meanwhile, Seiya remains on the bridge, lying on the ground, weak from exhaustion. He recalls when Minato told Seiya that he should start archery because Seiya said so. Back in the present, Minato finds Seiya on the bridge. He hands Seiya a talisman, telling him it is charged with everyone's energy. However, Seiya refuses, insisting that he is not worthy of it. Suddenly, he panics, claiming that the team does not need him anymore and that he cannot do anything for them. Minato tells Seiya that from now on, he will shoot alongside him. Then, standing up, he says he will wait, just like Seiya waited for him when his mom died and when he struggled with target panic. Because of that, he was able to come back. Seiya asks Minato that he cannot leave him waiting now. The next day, Masaki sees Seiya practicing at the Kyudo club and asks if he's feeling better. Masaki then apologizes for what he asked before. However, Seiya responds that his answer to the previous question is that he still hates Misaki, shocking everyone. However, Misaki smiles at Seiya. Later that night, Misaki puts on his old beggar-like clothes and picks up a bow. As he prepares to shoot, he recalls Seiya's words and his grandfather's teachings. However, when he releases the arrow, it misses the target. The next day at school, Seiya informs the team that their overall accuracy has improved. However, when Kaido asks for details, Seiya says that Misaki ordered him to keep it a secret. Meanwhile, everyone feels uncomfortable watching Misaki eat an absurd amount of spice from his strange dish. Nana whispers to Minato that Seiya seems more relaxed lately. Seiya, noticing the hushed conversation, turns around and asks if Nana is saying something. Nana quickly replies that he's just talking about how everyone is doing. The bell rings, and Seiya tells Minato to hurry, or they'll have to rush through changing. However, Minato tells him to go ahead without him, realizing he left his gym clothes in the changing room at the dojo. As Minato stands by his locker in the Kyudo hall, he overhears Tomio Sensei and Misaki talking. Tomio Sensei brings up a past conversation, reminding Misaki that when he was asked why he became a coach, he had said it was revenge against his master. Misaki is shocked to hear this, as if he had not expected the topic to resurface. The next day at the Kyudojo, Seiya notices that Minato seems down, as if he is hiding something. Later, as they head home, Seiya finally asks if something is wrong. Seiya tells him that, if he is worried about something, he can share. Minato tells him that, when he stopped by Kyudo Hall, he then told him about the revenge part. Seiya remarks that Misaki acts like he does not have a care in the world, but he can tell he's hiding something. Minato then shares that when he first met Misaki, he was shooting 10,000 arrows. Seiya explains that it is a ritual performed by someone who wants to make a wish. He then asks if Minato ever asked Misaki why he was doing it, but Minato admits that he could not bring himself to ask. The next day, Misaki looks for a diary from his grandfather, but instead he finds his pictures. Later, Misaki shows the picture to Nakozaki to identify people in the picture. Nakozaki tells Misaki that they are Yasaka and Seonji, explaining that those three were once the vanguard of the Kyudo world. He adds that they no longer accept students these days. However, when Nakozaki mentions that he can contact Seonji, Misaki is taken by surprise. Later, Misaki puts on a suit and visits Seonji's house. To his shock, it turns out to be the same woman who once trained Minato and Shu. Inside her house, Seonji remarks that she never expected Minato to become Misaki's student. Minato then explains that both he and Shu from Kirasaki once studied archery under her. Misaki, curious, asks why she took them and despite not accepting students. Seonji replies that although Minato was a bit rude, he seemed earnest, so she decided to give him a chance. Seonji tells Misaki that she had wanted to train him back then, but his grandfather was already his mentor. However, Misaki admits that he hated his grandfather, and before they had the chance to mend their relationship, it was too late. On his way back, Misaki reflects on Seonji's words. Later, while having a drink with Minato, he shares that his grandfather once questioned his dedication. Misaki admits that he rebelled against his grandfather's methods and eventually ran away from home. After his grandfather passed away, Misaki felt like he had achieved perfect accuracy. People praised his skill, and he was invited across Japan to participate in demonstrations. And the reason behind giving up on Archer, he started those 10,000 shots. Misaki then tells Minato that watching him struggle with target panic awakened something inside him. He admits that he is still fixated on his grandfather and realizes that if he wants to continue as a coach, he needs to truly understand who his grandfather was. Minato asks if Misaki plans to visit his grandfather's best friend. Misaki admits that he has considered it, but for now, it feels too difficult. The next day, Minato shares what he learned about Misaki with the others. Ryuhei, surprised, remarks that he always thought Misaki would be the mature one, but it turns out he has even more problems than they expected. Suddenly, Seiya asks the others what they think about kids in middle school. He explains that back then, they believed they were mature, just as they seemed at the time. However, he now realizes that even parents and teachers are not as mature as they once thought. Then, Misaki enters the room, announcing that it's time for practice. However, Kaido asks if Misaki was able to get in touch with Ason Sensei. Before Misaki can respond, Minato apologizes, admitting he should not have sought advice from others without talking to him first. Misaki reassures them and reveals that he contacted Ason, who asked him if he would like to manage this year's Nosha. However, Misaki is not going since he doesn't have timing. Misaki tells them that they are more important to him than his dead grandfather. Minato pleads with Masaki to go meet Asone, insisting that he will not get another opportunity like this again. Minato then explains that he always wanted to talk to his mom, but because she was always there, he kept putting it off. He thought there would always be more time, so that he could do it anytime. But one day, she just left Minato alone in this world. Then, all the boys insist that Masaki should go. Later, at Nakazaki's store, Masaki tells him that the boys encouraged him to take this step. Masaki then announces that the tournament is in 2 days and that he won't be there tomorrow. The girls assure him that they will keep an eye on the boys in his absence. On the day of the tournament, the boys grow anxious as Masaki has not responded to their messages, and he's running late. Suddenly, Nakazaki arrives, completely out of breath. He urges the boys to stay calm before revealing that Ren called him and says that Masaki had an accident last night. Seiya immediately asks if Masaki is alright, but Nakazaki admits he doesn't know much himself. However, he tells them that before the accident, Masaki had ordered headbands for them as a token of gratitude for helping him overcome his cowardice. At first, Nakazaki hesitated, but he decided to tell them in the end. Seiya says that the shock would have been worse if they found out later, so it is good Nakazaki told them now. After receiving the headbands, Seiya distributes them among the group. Minato remains in shock. When Seiya hands him his headband, he says that it is his fault for forcing Masaki to go. Just as he is about to say more, Seiya suddenly slaps him. As the tournament begins, the girls notice that the boys seem distracted. However, Seo clutches her headband and says that it will be alright. Meanwhile, the boys keep searching for any news about Masaki's accident. Tomio-sensei also arrives. Minato asks him if he contacted Masuki, but he says no one answered the call. The boys find no news about Masaki's accident anywhere on the internet. Meanwhile, Seo grows worried about them, knowing their group match is about to start soon. Suddenly, Neo loses her temper and scolds the boys, demanding to know if they plan to stay huddled together forever. Minato, realizing her point, stands up. He apologizes to Seo and asks the girls to hold on to their phones. Then, he turns to Seiya and thanks him. With that, the boys' motivation is reignited. Seo and Tomio-sensei notice the shift. After a while, the team is finally cheering again. Tomio-sensei reflects that what lies ahead will be their greatest trial yet. On the other hand, Matamura informs his team that Kazemai's coach, Masaki, had an accident and is not present at the tournament. Meanwhile, Minato overhears people talking about Kirasaki and their phenomenal performance, fueling the pressure even more. Seiya reminds the boys that the group match consists of 2 halves, and their score will be based on the number of successful shots. With that in mind, the boys take a deep breath, steady themselves, and step forward, ready to enter the competition arena. Afterwards, they manage to hit their targets one by one. In round 3, they start to fall. However, Seo thinks that, if they were shooting with their usual skill, she thinks they are shoo-in for finals. After checking the scoring chart, Nanao realizes that their team is still in the running. Ryuhei, feeling guilty, apologizes, admitting that he cannot stop thinking about Masaki. However, Seiya reminds everyone to focus on what's ahead instead of dwelling on their emotions. Fueled with determination, Kaido steps forward, telling everyone to remember Masaki's teachings and give them their all. Back on the track, Minato realizes that he never felt this level of intensity during his middle school matches. As they prepare to shoot, the boys recall Masaki's lessons. Kaido remembers being told to turn his bow correctly, while Ryuhei focuses on keeping his shoulder steady. They take their positions, ready to give them their best. Kaido misses his shot, but Ryuhei manages to hit his target. Seiya remembers what Masaki once told him, that skill and personality are 2 different things. Taking a deep breath, he steadies himself, focuses, and releases his arrow. It flies straight and hits the target. Minato recalls what Masaki told him earlier, to look down on others from the top. However, he still misses the shot. Neo realizes that, if they miss 3 or more now, this half will be worse than their first. Minato finally understands why he feels afraid. There is no one behind him anymore. Back in the day, he always had Seiya and Shu by his side, but now, he feels alone. He shifts his gaze to Kaido's back. At this moment, all he can do is watch as Kaido takes his shot, and it lands on the target. Minato understands what Masaki had been trying to teach him all along. He is not meant to look for someone to rely on. Instead, he should be the one looking out for everyone. Minato finally hits his target, after realizing everything that has been happening with him. Neo and Seo know that things are looking bad. The instructor gathers the boys and announces that they have to do a face-off. One of the girls informs them that another school has also scored 28, meaning they are tied for the next round. Minato suddenly tells the team to forget Masaki's teachings. Kaido loses his mind and snaps at Minato, saying that they have trusted Masaki all this time, and now he is telling them to forget everything. However, when Minato says Kaido's name, Kaido angrily tells him not to use it. He then grabs Minato by the collar. Minato says everyone is names and tells them that they are a team. Seiya asks him what he just realized. Minato explains that not having anyone behind him made him feel alone. So, he realized that he should look forward now, and that he should look at all of them. When the boys return to the match, Hanazawa realizes that their auras have changed. Minato pulls back his bow. Just as the arrow is about to hit the target, Shu smiles, as if he already knew it would happen. After the match, Nakozaki runs toward the results board and excitedly tells Masaki over the phone that Seo is out. However, the boys made it, they are in the tournament finals. Nakozaki then puts the phone on the speaker, and the boys ask if Masaki is alright. Masaki reassures them that he is undergoing some tests, but is fine. The team feels great after hearing that they are going to the finals. Minato asks if they can send Ren a message. Meanwhile, the twin clowns watch them from above, amused by how they are hyping themselves up. As the finals approach, inside the arena, the stray dog asks Shu if there are any former members of their club at Kazemai. Shu responds that there are 2. The dog then asks if he thinks he can beat them. Finally, it's time for the second match of the boys' semifinals. Shu gets into position. He recalls what Seonji said to Minato. She told him to use his hand. This memory lingers in Shu's mind, especially because he was the one who told her that Minato had injured the base of his thumb. After the twins take their turn, Shu steps into position. Meanwhile, Minato grows curious. He admires Shu's form, thinking it looks beautiful, but Seiya insists that Minato's form is even better. Minato then recalls the moment when Shu told him to take responsibility for reaching greater heights. Meanwhile, the Kirasaki group also secures a spot in the finals. Upon hearing this, Nano receives a text from Ren. Looking around, he spots Ren sitting with Nakozaki, who scolds him for being there. Nakozaki tells Ren that Kazemai has already defeated Masayuki and advanced to the finals. Meanwhile, the twin dogs talk about how they are not worthy to stand in the presence of their opponents. Matamura, however, tells them to remain calm if they want to win. He reminds them that this will be the final tournament for Seiya and himself, so Seiya expects Kirasaki's chosen members to deliver an impressive performance. Inside, Shu and Seiya walk together. Shu asks Seiya if he is still choosing Minato. Seiya replies that he is no longer chasing him but walking alongside him. Afterward, Shu sits with Minato and tells him that he is thrilled to shoot with him again. Finally, both teams enter the tournament room. Meanwhile, Seonji joins Nakozaki and Ren in the seating area. She tells them that since her students are participating, she has to be here. Kaido is the first to shoot, and he successfully hits the target. The twins also hit their targets, as do Minato and the others. In the next round, all of them manage to hit their targets again. Minato realizes that Kaido cannot move on to the next motion until everything feels just right. Ryohei is purely focused on his target, while Seiya executes every gesture with perfect ease. Both Kirasaki and Kazemai remain neck and neck on the scoreboard, keeping the match intensely competitive. Kaido leads the way, and the rest of the team follows his lead. After Senchai hits his target, Mangi once again misses, causing Hakazami to realize that at a level where 18 points are needed, the pressure becomes overwhelming. Neo says that it's going to come down to the two Achai, Minato and Shu. Seonji observes that Minato is focused on the target, but Shu is not. Minato steadies himself, reassuring himself that if he misses, the others will hit, and if the others miss, he will make sure to hit. At that moment, Masaki enters the stadium, saying that if Minato understands this, then he should also realize that everyone is watching him shoot. Minato takes his beautifully executed shot. The entire audience watches in surprise as his arrow moves through the air, and, in the end, hits the target. Kazemai's team finally wins the match, and Masaki congratulates Tomio-sensei. Ren, surprised to see him, asks what he is doing there. Masaki casually admits that he ran away from the hospital. Later that night, Minato is in the Kyudojo, where he asks Masaki about his noshi. Masaki describes it as both strange and nice at the same time. Minato then asks if he enjoys archery. Masaki smiles and replies that it took him a few detours to get there. Finally, Masaki tells Minato that he is about to take his last of 10,000 shots. With that, he draws his bow, releases the arrow, and hits the target. At Kyudojo, Masaki shouts that he has news, and the boys quickly gather around, asking if it's good or bad. Instead of answering, he asks if they like idols. The boys glance at each other with excited looks. Ryuhei asks if Masaki has become a fan, but Masaki quickly says that's not it. Then, he asks if they have ever heard of a group called Princess Cheer. Masaki tells the boys that a TV station in Tokyo reached out to him and sent a proposal. They want to film Noririn training at his shrine. Curious, Minato opens the proposal and quickly realizes that she is training to become a Miko. Masaki adds that the station knows they perform Nosha at the Amatsu Star Festival, so they were hoping to capture scenes of it. Then, Masaki tells them that he asked them for some time to think it over. Masaki wonders what kind of person Noririn is. Hearing this, Nanoa tells him that someone in the Kirasaki group knows more about her. Ryuhei then asks Nanoa how they became friends, but Nanoa admits that he doesn't even know the person's name or email. Later, at the Kirasaki club, Shu receives a message from Minato. After reading it, he turns to Seiss and says that someone is asking about Noririn. Meanwhile, the boys from Kazemi go to a cafe, where they come across the twin dogs. As they look at the menu, they are shocked by how expensive everything is. Back at the club, Seiss introduces Matamura, who is their club president. After a brief introduction, Seiss asks if they know anything about Noririn's age, address, or even the members of her group. Without waiting for an answer, he hands them a study guide he had prepared earlier so they can learn more about her. Seiya flips through the guide and casually remarks that Noririn looks the same no matter what hairstyle she has. This immediately angers Seiss, who gets so mad that he nearly lunges at Seiya in frustration. Seiss asks him that he has no interest or dedication, so why he called him here. Kaido tells Seiss that they have no interest in Noririn and that only Masaki has some kind of business with his idol. Shu then asks if Kazemi's coach needs more information about Noririn and if that's why he gave the task to the team members. Minato informs them that Noririn will be coming to the shrine for a photo shoot. Later, all the boys head to the shrine together. On the way, Seiss warns them that any offense they give to Noririn will reflect badly on him. After looking at Masaki, Seiss tells the members that he passed the test. He explains that he has a duty to protect his princess. Seiss looks around the shrine, carefully checking if it is worthy of his princess. After a moment, he turns to Masaki and asks if he can ask a few questions. Seiss then asks how passionate Masaki is about having Noririn. Hearing this, Kaido interrupts, saying they should really be asking what makes Noririn worthy of receiving Masaki's coaching. Matamura tells Seiss that if he's that worried, he should just observe the photo shoot himself. Masaki agrees and says he wouldn't mind having Seiss there, just like the other Kazemi boys. Seiss then asks Masaki to pretend to be Noririn and teach him some Kyudo. Hearing this, Shu chimes in, saying he would love to receive Masaki's training as well. Masaki hands them a set of uniforms that are both nice and a little cringy while Ren takes a group picture of them. Masaki then begins explaining some Kyudo methods, telling everyone that there are no opponents in Kyudo, as it is a sport of equality made up of 8 basic movements. To demonstrate, he spreads his legs in the proper stance, just the way Noririn prefers, and then carefully shows them how the movements and techniques of Kyudo work. Masaki then demonstrates how to properly hold the bow and shoot in perfect order. He instructs them to maintain their tension and stay focused throughout the process. Watching this, Kaido wonders why Masaki is helping to improve Kirasaki. Minato responds, explaining that if everyone gets better, it will make the matches more exciting. Shu asks Masaki to instruct him as well, to which Masaki agrees, wondering what he is up to. Shu then tells everyone that having a teacher is a blessing, even for the smallest things. Seiya immediately recognizes the words and mentions that the quote comes from a famous person. After that, everyone gets into a position to practice. When Shu takes his turn, he once again shoots a perfect shot, reminding Masaki why he is Kirasaki's Achai. Shu asks Masaki about how he can improve his form and his Kyudo. Masaki tells him that he can do it through the word love, which surprised everyone. Masaki then asks everyone if any of them has ever been in love. Nano, being a creep, had his eyes on his teacher's talents. Curious, Masaki asks him how it felt. Nano casually replies that he found her cute and liked her a lot. However, Masaki quickly shuts him down, saying that's not real love. He explains that love isn't something a person just does, it's something they fall into. Shu questions Masaki, asking what love has to do with Kyudo. In response, Masaki asks if he has ever been in love. When Shu does not answer, Masaki tells him that means he is still far from understanding the core of Kyudo. Masaki then explains that the ideal mindset for Kyudo is one of complete ego annihilation. He says they must abandon the worldly focus on simply hitting the target, and instead embrace the deeper meaning behind the art. After hearing that, Seiss steps forward, saying that when he thinks of Noririn, he enters a state of ego annihilation, and he allows Masaki to instruct Noririn. Later, the group leaves the shrine. They talked about how the second half was just a normal practice. Minato says that it's been a while since he got a blister. Kaido asks if he is still a beginner, to which Minato has always been that way. Minato admits that his target panic is still not cured, so he got carried away. The boys stand in a circle as Minato reflects on Masaki's words. He realizes that when he takes a shot, he thinks it is great and looks back on it. Later, Masaki gets a phone call informing him that Noririn could not fit the shoot into her schedule. That's it for today, my fellow men of culture. Like and subscribe the channel for more plot-filled recaps.